Hello and welcome. So in today's video we're going to be looking at the HMO requirements in terms of fire safety when it comes to your next kind of refurbishment project or your next HMO property. Now, there's a couple of things to consider when it comes to buying and running a HMO as a landlord and a property investor that you don't necessarily consider if it's a straightforward buy-to-let quite as much. Part of these is to do with the fire regulations and requirements to make sure that the property is up to standard, make sure it's suitable for multiple tenants living in that property. And ultimately for tenants sometimes that don't necessarily integrate or speak to each other on a regular basis, what you don't want to have, that you don't tend to have in family kind of properties, is where you have rooms locked, you can't get out and you don't know, you don't have a clear exit route essentially. So when it comes to the fire regulations around HMO properties, what I'd certainly suggest is to speak to your local HMO housing officer. Now, a lot of people or investors get worried about this because they think the kind of HMO officer is going to give them a ream of different kind of requirements of what they need to do to the property, and it's going to be very expensive and it's not going to be needed, all this kind of stuff. But often it's a misconception. What the HMO officer is there to do is make sure that that property is safe for use, fit for purpose essentially. And when you get the HMO officer on the phone, when you speak to them, they'll very often offer to come and have a look at the property for you for free. They'll look at it, come down and give you advice and tips on how you can make sure that that property is sufficiently suitable for the tenant profile that you're looking at, obviously to run it as a HMO. And their advice that they give you very often is quite simple, quite straightforward, but it means that you've got another person looking at it completely independent to yourself to give you some very good advice and opinions on what that property needs to have from a fire regulation point of view. Now, we're in a recent property that we've just finished from a refurb recently for a HMO, and there's a couple of things that you need to consider that we've obviously done on this particular property that will give you a bit of an insight into the fire regulations. So first of all, thumb turn locks on the bedroom doors and also the front door and the back door, so any exit routes essentially. And that's key, because what you don't want to be having is a fire in the property and a tenant not being able to find a key to get out of their room or a key to get out the front door or the back door if it's locked or been misplaced. That's obviously going to cause major issues. So from a health and safety aspects, you want to make sure the tenant's got a clear route of exit, and that's why thumb turn kind of locks essentially on the inside of the doors allow people to kind of get that quick exit route out of the property. Fire doors as well, that's massively important when it comes to a fire route. So you need to make sure that that route is protected. So ultimately, if you're coming down from a bedroom, down the stairs, out through, like a lot of houses are kind of created like that, out through a hallway, corridor, out through the front door maybe, or the back door of the building, that any particular kind of high risk areas, so maybe the kitchen, is completely kind of separated with fire doors. So you don't have therefore the exit route exposed. So on a particular property that we've just done now, we've got 5 bedrooms, a lounge, kitchen area. All of the bedrooms have fire doors. The kitchen has 2 fire doors on it, one at one entry point, another at the other entry point. The communal lounge has a fire door on it. So ultimately, all of those areas are sufficiently protected. So if there's a fire in one particular part of the building, people have enough time and warning to get out of the property with clear routes of exit. And that's where it's key to try and speak to your local HMO officer, because they can come out and have a look at the building and assess it directly on its building's merits and where they feel like you need to make these improvements from a fire kind of standpoint essentially. And that's very hard for me to give you over a kind of a video because each property is going to be different. So it's well worth speaking to your local HMO officer. Obviously fire doors, things like fire intermittent strips, making sure it's got the door closers on, all of that is key as well. Things like fire alarms. So all of the bedrooms and the corridors and the communal areas, they should all have fire alarms in them. You should have a heat fire alarm in all of those key places. Sorry, a smoke fire alarm in all those key places and a heat fire alarm in the kitchen. They can be integrated, or they should be integrated, so if one goes off, the rest go off in the building. And depending upon the size of your HMO, you may also need to look at upgrading that fire alarm system to a panelled system. And that is dictated somewhat by the amount of rooms, amount of bedroom spaces and people you have in that particular property. So again, that comes back to speaking to your local housing officer and asking them what the requirements are for your particular area, your particular council, and the property and the size and the number of tenants you're putting into that property, so that you can make sure it's sufficiently protected and obviously ticks all the boxes from a fire and health and safety point of view. But hopefully it helps. Hopefully it gives you a bit of an insight in terms of what's kind of required when it comes to looking at kind of the fire requirements for your next HMO. And we'll put down in the link on some of this video as well, some other videos regarding kind of HMOs, regulations, things like that, so you can make sure you're fully up to scratch when it comes to looking at viewing your next or purchasing your next HMO property. So I hope that helps. Thank you for watching this video. If you like this content and you'd like to join our free online property training course, we've got a link for it on this page. And in there we cover a range of different property strategies to help you get started, either building a long-term property portfolio or creating a cash-flowing property business. We also look at ways to increase your return on investment with any of the properties you're maybe considering. And we also have a couple of cheat sheets and downloadable documents in there as well. Simply click on the link to join the free training course today.